Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Watches with Dennis. I'm making sure the stream's all running here, so just give me a moment. Hopefully, let's see, we don't need to hear sound. That should be all right. Okay. All right. Well, it's been about a week, and I believe some of you may have caught the last episode that we did, which was a this or that or a tot. And I had a couple of guests on for that. And obviously, you can go back and catch the recording, but the feedback on that episode was very positive. So I'm probably going to do that again here in the future. Just it'll take me a little bit of time to develop some more tots to do. And obviously, recruiting people, trying to find a time that they can all do makes it very, very sort of clunky versus just being able to come online and do something like this. So the reason why I wanted to do a live stream today, and we're doing it earlier than normal. I'm actually on vacation. I took a few days off because I'm at vacation cap, and I thought, well, let's do something meaningful. But rather than put together a pre-recorded video, there were a few topics that have come up recently. 3 topics, as is often the case with a lunch live stream, that I want to go ahead and do. But before we go ahead and get into that, I will just do some updates. So channel-wise, there are a few options now available for anyone interested. There is a shop with some logo stuff. If that's your thing, you can find those somewhere in the channel. You can find those somewhere in the channel. Also, there is an option to join as a member. I put whatever the lowest rate was. I think that's 99 cents a month. So that's an option as well if you want access to some emoticons or whatnot for a while the live streams are going on. That's probably the main attraction thing. I think I note I'll try and prioritize answering comments, but as people note, I think I try pretty hard to answer comments that seem to warrant having an answer. Some people are just making statements, but if there's something worth discussing, I do try and weigh in on it. Other than that, as I noted on the last live stream, I did finally pull the trigger on ordering an Omega 300M. I have finally received it, so I got the gray dial version. So obviously, I'm wearing it at this time. Review is not out yet. I like to wear the watch at least a week first, so I don't have quite enough time on it yet to put that video together. But I do expect to have that video out within probably the next 10 days or so, would be my guess. But anyway, that's a sort of my update regarding what's going on with the channel. So let's go ahead and let's start with the first of the 3 discussion topics that I wanted to do for this lunch period. So we got 2 watch topics, and then we got a watch news topic, sort of a watch journalism topic that I think is pretty interesting. But I put that towards the end because as people trickle in, they might rather hear that one. So we'll save the best for last, and we'll do the worst one first. And I say the worst one because Union Glashütte, if you're not familiar with it, this is not a brand that's sold in the United States. I wish it was, because they constantly have watches that I think are interesting. And especially the 1893 line, which is one I've looked at from time to time. They're owned by Swatch, though. So in a way, it's odd that this is a company that has yet to come out in the US. I believe you can buy in the UK. Most of Europe has it available. I also believe maybe Hong Kong, somewhere in Asia. Dubai probably has it as well, if I remember. I looked at the map at one point. Oh, and hello, Obese Tuna. Welcome to the lunch live stream today, this glorious Friday. So don't worry, this site doesn't have close-ups, but I do have another site loaded. You can see up at the top where we'll get a better look from the Union Glashütte site. But so this is the Johannes Dürrstein. I'm hoping I said that right. Power Reserve version of the 1893, which has just come out. So the 1893 line is sort of the ones that tend to be a little more asymmetrical. That's why I've always been interested in them. In a way, we maybe hate to use the term poor man's, but it's kind of like the poor man's Glashütte Original, which is the poor man's Langenzone. Obviously, you can debate which designs are better. I actually would say the GO has some better asymmetry going on than the Langes do, but everyone's mileage may vary on that. So we'll get a better look here in a moment, but this is a Power Reserve indicator watch. It's not a particularly asymmetrical watch, other than I think it's pretty interesting how they've placed the small seconds at the 9 o'clock position and then done at the 5 o'clock position, the Power Reserve. It's a hand wind only movement. That's part of the announcement, is this is a new caliber. Obviously, being owned by Swatch Group means ETA is in the Swatch family, so they get access to ETA. I believe the way they do it is they actually assemble the movements in Germany, but guess they come as kits or whatnot from the ETA factory. So they're able to brand these as made in Germany watches, but obviously the same origin is such that you would expect from the ETA Swiss movements. So this is the UNG-51.SI movement. It's hand wound 4 Hertz movement. And the watch is about $2,500. So anyway, I just think it's an interesting look that I don't see from a lot of other companies. So let's go ahead and let's bounce to their website so you can actually see some meaningful images that we can zoom in on. So here's the dial. Now, my understanding is that the white sort of chapter ring portion, this is enamel. And you can see where some of the asymmetry, even just in that part, stands out. So it bulges out here at the 5 o'clock to accommodate the Power Reserve with the pointer. The Power Reserve is printed on, but has a hand. Some of the less expensive, older heritage Grand Seiko spring drives with their Power Reserves kind of did it like this, where they're printed rather than sort of cut in. But obviously they did a little bit of a bulge out here into the enamel area in order to accommodate the pointer. And again, you have that going on here at the 9 o'clock as well, where you have the small seconds, and then hour and minute, of course, are central like you would expect. Made in Germany branding, because as I noted, that's where they manufacture the movements in addition to all the other parts. And Union Glashütte branding up at the 12 o'clock position. Date window, white, often the case with Union Glashütte, but with the white chapter ring, I think that actually works really well with this style. You can see the euro price at 24.80. And we'll take a closer look here at this new movement, hand wound movement. So of course you can appreciate a lot of it. Not all of it, obviously, because they're doing this like 3/4 plate, which is something I think they're fond of with their movements. So, but you can see the ratchet wheel, crown wheel, obviously the balance is visible as well, as is the click spring. So again, it's got some striping on it. Not the most decorated movement, but at the price point, about what I think you would expect. I'm assuming these are thermally blued hands. I think they're fond of that. It looks like it. At the price point, I would expect it. So, and another thing I thought was really interesting about this, though not unique to Union Glashütte, is this textured, sandblasted style dial outside of the enamel. So white enamel is a really nice, clean look. I know all the enamel dials are extremely popular with some individuals. In this case, though, you've got part of that, and then you've got this textured look, which when I see it, it reminded me of those new Pro Pilots. If you've seen the new Pro Pilots from Oris, I believe they kind of have the sandblasted dial, which I think looks really good. Zen also had some limited editions. I think I have them in like 5 colors. I did a video on them back around Watches and Wonders time. But they I think did the sandblast for those color designs. It's kind of hard to tell, I think, from the initial rendered photos, but as some on-wrist photos came out, it became clear that they had some texturing to them, which, again, I think works really, really well. So overall, I think this is a pretty attractive watch, not a full-on asymmetrical in the sense I would think of, where the hour and minute hands are no longer centralized, but rather put off on one of the sides. But 9 o'clock Power Reserve, pretty atypical, not totally atypical. We're gonna touch on another watch here from IWC as our next topic, actually, that does similar. But then obviously the Power Reserve being at the 5 o'clock position, date in the traditional 3 o'clock window. I just think it's really well balanced. I like the numeral style here that they're using on the chapter ring. It's not like full on ball watch, that classic kind of train style. I don't know what else to call it. I was thinking of it as the ball train style script, but it's to me reminiscent of that, which is a style I've been really fond of. Ball doesn't use it all that much on their watches anymore, only a few of them. So I actually don't have a watch with that style of Arabic numerals, but I've been sorely tempted to try and get one. But again, as I've noted, these are not sold by authorized dealers, at least last I checked earlier this year, in the United States. And I don't know if Swatch is ever going to change that or not, because I think Union Glashütte operates in a special space, I guess I would say. Like, so it's a German brand, and we have access to German brands, obviously, in the United States, including through Swatch. But for me, Germany kind of falls into 2 broad camps. You've got the Bauhaus camp of what Younghaus and Nomos kind of occupy. And then you've got the more creative design placement style that is more the Glashütte, I guess, to me. where I think of a Longa Zona, Glashütte Original, and Union Glashütte. And the thing is, because they're using like modified, of course, a swatch group, but ETA movements as their driving factor, Union Glashütte comes in at a much lower price point than Glashütte Original. So I think there's an opportunity here for people that are kind of in that style. They want that camp, but they're not comfortable going up to like $8,000+ for a watch. Why not talk about a watch where I've looked at a number of the Union Glashüttes and they're often operating at that under $3,000 price point. So I think it's a good opportunity there, but obviously it's up to Swatch to do their analysis. I don't know how well these watches sell in Europe. And maybe that's part of the reason they've held back on sending them over to the Swatch dealers, or Swatch. Sorry, yeah, Swatch Group. I mean, not the Swatch dealers, but the Swatch Group dealers. So anyway, so that's the first topic. I just, again, not a watch you usually see over in the States, but one that I think is very interesting. I'll take a sip here of Cherry Coke Zero. And so let's go on to the next topic. Let me minimize my head and get us on the screen share again. So here's the other announcement that I wanted to talk about that I saw. And this is the IWC Portugieser Automatic with what they have been calling, or at least this article calls, the Panda dial, or more accurately, the blue Panda dial. You can see the reference number up at the top of the article. Okay, Portugieser Automatic. This is a watch that I've had a few viewers write into me about, or we've discussed on the live stream as one that is catching some eyes. And it's not a watch, Portugieser is not a watch that I've ever really looked in much until over about the last month. I'd say the last 3 or 4 weeks I've started to look at these more and more. And they have a variety of different dial designs, some of which bother me because they crop the numerals, but this one doesn't. And that's part of the reason I wanted to talk about it. So this is a little over 42 millimeters in diameter. It's a little over 14 millimeters thick. You can see it's got a white dial with blue subdials and blue numerals and hands, white date wheels. So it's color matched to the base color of the dial. And it's sort of that Panda aesthetic with how the subdials are placed in the contrast with the blue versus the white of the main dial. So it's an automatic movement, and it comes on it's an alligator style strap. It's calf leather. It's not an actual alligator strap. Price is pretty high though. It's over $13,000, but looking at it, it's pretty impressive. So let's go ahead and do some zoom ins on this. So here we go. All right, so now you can get a better look at the applied Arabic numerals. And sometimes, as I noted on the Portugieser, they do the thing where the subdials, when they've got subdials, crop into the numerals, but they didn't do that here. I have a terrible reaction to the cropped numerals. It's something I've still haven't been able to get around, including on watch designs like the Breitling Heritages and stuff like that, pistachio dial, which have grown on me so much, but the cropped numerals just put me off of really being able to consider it as a watch I would want to own. But that being said, when I see this, I always initially start to scroll past when I see this design because I think it's a chronograph. And then I realize, oh, wait a moment, this is not a chronograph. It's just a really clever use of subdials in a non-chronograph format. And this is not new to the Portugieser. IWC has other color schemes you can get this in. But in case you can't tell, if you're not watching on your phone or whatnot. So we've got central hour and minute. And just like that Union Glashütte we were talking about, the 1893 we just looked at, the small seconds is actually placed for balance purposes, I'm assuming, at the 9 o'clock position, because the other subdial at the 3 o'clock is actually a power reserve. Now, it's not like the normal power reserve because this is actually listed in days and it goes up to a week. So you've got a 7-day power reserve on this watch. And that's something that it's probably part of the reason why the price point is the price point. I mean, that being said, it's IWC. IWC watches are always, in my view, very expensive. If you look at their Fliegers, which they were one of the 5 historic Flieger manufacturers, the one that was Swiss to supply the Germans in World War II. At this day and age, they still do Fliegers, and they're also like the most consistently expensive ones. I guess Vempes are probably around the same price, but like I don't know of IWC watches that are under $4,000, at least not used. So anyway, one of the things though about the movement is sort of interesting. So the way they get that power reserve is this movement actually has 2 barrels to supply. So 2 barrels with 2 mainsprings to supply power. That's how it's able to get so high. So again, as we noted, it's automatic movement. You can see the rotor here with the gold logo, balance, all of that. So again, it's an interesting movement because the power reserve is extremely impressive. And I don't recall what the watch beats at, if it's a 4 hertz movement or not. Yes, it is. Okay, so 4 hertz or 28,800 beats per hour. So again, like power reserve, one of the tricks, maybe tricks a little harsh, but one of the tricks that watch manufacturers would do, Swatch is extremely fond of this on their lower end watches, like with Tissot, is to lower the beat rate on the movements, like on the ETA movements, do modifications, and then you get things like the Powermatic, with 80 hours of power reserve, but they drop it down to a 3 hertz movement. So you can slow that up and get a lot more power reserve out of it. So I'm always really impressed when a watch is able to maintain a kind of modern beat rate of 4 hertz and still give you a really, really long power reserve. And obviously in this case, it's because of that double barrel technology. But as noted on that medallion, apparently is 18 karat gold. So it's not just gold color. This thing is actually made out of gold. Oh, gold, a little bit of gold. You need a taste of gold. There you go. You got some gold. Obviously that's the back of the watch though, so you're not going to appreciate that from the dial. Calf alligator, faux alligator strap. I mean, it's nice. I like these blue straps. Cartier is kind of a fan of doing that alligator blue on some of their Santos Dumonts that they have now. So overall, a really clean look. I've been looking at this watch a bit. I wouldn't say seriously. I haven't been seriously shopping for it, but I have checked a few out used that do this sort of Panda-esque style dial with black dials though, like black and white, kind of more of a traditional look. But with the power reserve being the 3 o'clock subdial and the small seconds at the 9, rather than the chronographs. I've not been interested in the chronograph Portuguesers, but I know some of the viewers have been because I've been asked about them, and I've had to look them up because I'm just not familiar. I wouldn't pay this price, 13,100 for this style of watch. I'd look gray for this, but that'd probably be the case for any IWC for me. It's just it's cool, but not. It's super balanced. IWC makes very nice watches. I just, it doesn't call to me like some of the other watches, some of the other watch brands. And again, maybe that's just because they have such classic looks. I'm so familiar with that look, and they're competing in a space against like JLC and such with this style of watch. But I have looked at this style of Portugueser, and I have been looking at the Portugueser without the power reserves, the more basic version, which also has a really clean look. A little more traditional placement on the small seconds there. I believe those are at the 6. So anyway, so that's what I had in terms of the 2 watches that I wanted to talk about on today's stream. The third thing that we have, I just saw yesterday. I don't know if it was just announced yesterday. I think it was. And that has to do with watch journalism, I guess, broadly speaking. And so we're going to talk Hodinkee and we're going to talk WatchBox because there have been some pretty big moves that have happened over the last 24 hours or so. Sorry, getting a little parched. So let's jump into that. Okay, let's jump into that topic. And I've got an article here from Watch Pro. So let's shrink me down again. All right, so if you don't follow Hodinkee in particular, this might not sound like anything, but it's actually, in my view, a super big deal. And that is Jack Forster, who has been at Hodinkee forever. And all right, forever's wrong. He's not been at Hodinkee since the start, but he's been at there a really long time. He has been the editor-in-chief of Hodinkee, but he's not anymore. He's gone over to WatchBox. Now, if you're familiar with WatchBox, I wasn't familiar with them for content outside of, I know they're a shop, and I follow their channel on YouTube because Tim Masso does all of those watch reviews where it's basically a 5 or 8 minute rundown of the specs of some watch that they're selling. So run through really good camera work. So you get a lot of rapid fire specs, like here's the thickness, here's the type of buckle it uses, here's the lug width, here's what he thinks the wrist sizes are that can pull off the lug to lug, all of that. Useful, but again, it is selling the watches, so they're not particularly critical reviews. And by not particularly, I mean not critical at all. So Jack, though, obviously being editor in chief, he was a high level position with Hodinkee. I think he'd been there over 7 years. Yes, okay, so 7 years. He was managing editor, and then most recently editor in chief. Jack's style of writing is very different than pretty much anyone else at Hodinkee. Very long form. His writing, his prose, his style of prose is extremely popular with people. He's got a mix of in-depth knowledge, but also kind of has a romantic flair to how he writes. So it's a really interesting combination. So it's like he's very technically minded, but he approaches the way he talks and writes about watches. And he's hosted a number of the video things. The Ask Hodinkee series is one of the few of the video items I regularly started watching only maybe 3 weeks ago. And so it's through that format that Jack answers a lot of questions. He's got a lot of the specifics. He's not someone that I've heard, and he may be able to, like, he doesn't fall into that camp of, to me, where you might hear a Teddy Baldassar. Obviously, he's not with Hodinkee, but he's got a very successful YouTube channel. Or there have been a few other YouTubers that kind of rattle off reference numbers. And I don't know. It's like, I guess it's kind of a cool party trick, but for most people, if you don't also know the reference number, rattling off reference numbers is exceedingly unhelpful. Having reference numbers, like I try and include reference numbers in my video descriptions, because if you want to search a watch, searching by reference number is great. I mean, God help you if you're trying to find an Omega and you don't have the reference number with all their different SKUs when you consider all the bands and straps that they've got. But that being said, when it comes to knowledge, I'm not particularly impressed by people who memorize a bunch of reference numbers. The only ones I can keep in my head are basically the ones I own. And if they're short, like Rolex reference numbers, Omega reference numbers, I don't even bother with. And maybe that's because I can't, that I'm not, I don't know. I just don't find it interesting. That's not how Jack comes across. Jack seems to know more about the history of you can sit down and he would be able to tell you, oh yes, the Cartier Americain, here's the predecessor watch that Cartier had with the elongated case, but it had a different dial design, and here are the differences, aesthetically, as to why you might choose one over the other. That's sort of what he's been at. But you can tell he's very knowledgeable just by hearing him speak on podcasts or when you read his writing. Obviously, when you're a writer, you can hide behind the research and maybe you don't think about it on the fly as quickly as someone on video or unedited video. Let's be fair. I can hide behind editing quite easily. But my point is he's actually smart. You can tell when he talks, you can tell that he's intelligent. So, and that's not to say the others at Hodinkee are not, but his knowledge is so in depth. I think he's done watch stuff for over 20 years at this point. So here's WatchBox coming in, relatively new company. Hodinkee is much older. WatchBox is only back from 2017 was when they were founded. And they've noted, the chairman of WatchBox has said here, and here's the quote that I'm going to read aloud: content and context are everything when it comes to the emotional connections we form with watches and any collectible category, serving as the foundation for the customer experience. Today's collector is increasingly connected with an endless range of influences and a never-ending stream of content. Attention is in demand. So, this is a coup. And I don't know the details. I haven't seen anything out of Hodinkee about Forster leaving. I did watch a video with Tim Masso over with WatchBox doing an interview with Jack, kind of a welcome to the team, and they had a little, I think it's about 10 minutes long. It's probably worth checking out if you're really curious. I won't link it though. Just search it out if you really want to know more about the discussion. But I think I've summarized sort of what Jack's knowledge base is as he comes into place. But of course, this begs the question of, like, what is Hodinkee going to do? Why did WatchBox make this move? It sounds like, from the write-up in the article that I have, and the article's linked in the description, WatchBox is wanting to further enhance their editorial side of the package. It's almost like they're pulling a 180 Hodinkee. So Hodinkee was a watch magazine, kind of enthusiast site system, and then venture capital came in. They set up a shop, and now they sell a whole bunch of stuff. There's a storefront side, and then there's the editorial side. And Hodinkee's got a large staff. I think it's over 24, but the editorial side's like 5 people. Well, 4 people now. Then you've got WatchBox, which I had thought wrongly, but I had thought all they did was sell watches. I thought the whole thing, I've heard Tim Masso is extremely knowledgeable. He is in his videos, but again, I didn't know how much of that is prep. I guess he does have some other discussion content where he has been involved in more editorializing, like where, you know, he actually shares his opinion on which companies have crappy bracelets and which companies are overpriced and things like that. But I've only ever really, when researching my own desires for watches, often if I search a reference number, one of Tim's videos pops up and I'm able to get some really good video and some baseline specs, which sometimes, many of you have probably gone and searched before, you're trying to find out a watch you want and you're just wanting to know like the lug to lug. You know, you ain't getting it from the manufacturer in most cases. And sometimes it's a chore to get it from the journalism sites, because if they haven't had hands-on time with the watch yet, they're usually just regurgitating the spec sheet. So with Jack Forster going to WatchBox, they're clearly making this move to enhance their editorial side, because he's not a salesman. Like Tim is a salesman side, but Tim plus Jack together, that's pretty compelling, I think, to a lot of people, because they're both seen as really, really knowledgeable individuals. And if Jack is going to coordinate the editorial stuff, he might have ideas on ways to better use Tim. Like anyone could really just hold the watches and talk into the camera and give you the 5-minute review of the watch for sale. And maybe Tim still wants to do that. But if Tim is as smart as people say he is, this might be a good way. Jack might have some ideas on ways to better involve him in the editorial side. But I think where my questions are, and this can be totally unfair, but we're allowed to be unfair. This is all alleged. This is all speculation, but that's part of the fun of any hobby, is doing some speculation, is why did Jack leave? He was editor-in-chief at Hodinkee. Like, that's pretty high up, right? There's not, on the editorial side, there was no higher he could go, was there? So why is he leaving? Did WatchBox just throw a bunch of money at him? And he'd be like, you know what? I'm going to make way more money. Did Hodinkee counter? Did he even ask Hodinkee to counter? I mean, when I've changed jobs, which is not often, I was with my job for over 16 years, and then I jumped ship. I did not ask for a counter. In fact, I took about a 10% pay cut moving to my current position because it was higher up the food chain, so to speak. I wanted to be in charge, and that's what it took to get that. So maybe it's something like that. I mean, obviously, editor-in-chief means he's in charge of the editorial content at Hodinkee, but WatchBox in this article, and I'll throw it back up here again, there's a portion where WatchBox notes what Jack's going to be doing for them, and they phrased it as he's going to oversee like the entire editorial landscape for WatchBox, and more than just doing editorials. Here it says his new role, I'm not sure what his job title is exactly, but his new role will see him leading the charge to diversify the editorial, video, and global event programs. So given all of that, perhaps it's just the more responsibility has been attractive to Jack. I mean, Jack's got 20 years experience in the watch field. He may want to do more than just editor-in-chief over the magazine at Hodinkee. So that could be part of it. Now, why is this an issue for Hodinkee? For a lot of longtime readers, and I'm not a longtime reader of Hodinkee, I still regularly check them. Many of you have watched my live streams in the past. If you've gone through the description, you've often seen I've cited Hodinkee articles. But Hodinkee as a site is not intellectually, I don't know that it's particularly satisfying. They got great photos. They're very proud of the first looks that they get. But a lot of that stems from the fact that they have extremely, extremely close ties to the watch industry. Now, I'm not clear on who all their investors are, but they're an authorized dealer now through their shop. They've always emphasized how the shop and the editorial team are completely independent, much like you would expect a newspaper to announce that the advertising bureau that handles the ads that run in the newspapers are separate from the journalism side. And I'm not doubting that. But the access, separate from the shop, the access that they get, it's reasonable. And I say it's reasonable because we've seen it in video games. It's reasonable to think that these In the video games, it was publishers. Here it's watch manufacturers. Might expect a certain level of puffery or light-handed use of their materials, no harsh judgments in exchange for this access. Should you be harsh, perhaps you don't get products before release. Perhaps you don't get sneak peeks. Perhaps we don't send you a complimentary review copy. It's interesting because I would think, perhaps wrongly, but Hodinkee is so big that the eyeballs they command, I would assume, would be such that manufacturers would rather keep Hodinkee involved than not. But I had a video not all that long ago. I have a link in the description for people who want to check it out. It's not very many people watched it, but I actually took a month's worth of official Hodinkee reviews. Like, they have a section on their site of reviews. And don't worry, this is going to get back to Jack Forster. Don't worry. And I went through and read all of them. Took hours, just a month's worth, because they had a lot, and looked for negative statements. Something where someone might say something like, this bracelet is bad, or it's uncomfortable, or the watch is too big. Not hedgy stuff like, you might not like the color. No, not that, but actual negative statements. It's a low percentage. Like, I almost want to say it's really shilly. And that may be unfair, but that perception is very widespread. The difference was, for a lot of people, a lot of longtime readers of Hodinkee, is Jack Forster, editor-in-chief. His articles were not seen like that. Now, I don't know how often he actually reviewed watches. A lot of his stuff wasn't quote-unquote official reviews, but rather like these deep dives into content, watch content. But it was appreciated. It was respected. His knowledge was evident. And that's why this is such a coup for WatchBox to have him involved in their editorial side of things. Hodinkee doesn't have another Jack Forster in the wings, in my opinion. They have some decently respected people, but they were all seen as broadly speaking, all seen as a tier below Jack. And that's the struggle. Are they going to promote from within to have a new editor-in-chief? I mean, they're going to have a new editor-in-chief, surely, at Hodinkee. They're not dropping the magazine or anything. But Jack's tough shoes to fill. I'm not saying it's impossible. Anyone's replaceable is a statement. It's a fair statement for people to have. So I'm sure Hodinkee will be able to manage it. It's not like they're going to go out of business over this or anything. But the loss looks really bad, especially because they haven't said anything, unless they've just now put something out. Last I checked, they hadn't said anything about this. And it's like, not even we wish you all the best, good luck. Like, you get or at least I get the vibe that maybe they didn't leave on the best of terms. And that may be that Jack took this job and Hodinkee felt blindsided, and maybe they didn't get much notice. I don't know. All that's speculative. But this positions, I had never thought of WatchBox as a place for editorial content. This one move makes me now think of them as such. And Hodinkee, with their continued, based off of my own analysis of inability to be critical of products, I think this feeds into unless Jack says something or Hodinkee says something, I think this is going to continue to feed into the narrative that exists on places like What You Seek, maybe on Reddit, but I'm more familiar with the forum side of it, that Hodinkee is a sellout organization, that they're about their shop, and they're about getting people to buy their overpriced watches. And I mean, when I shop watches and I check used prices, I very rarely go to the Hodinkee shop because it feels overpriced. Like, where have I bought used? David SW I've bought from. I've looked at WatchBox before, but not all that aggressively. Crown and Caliber, but how Hodinkee controls them now. But the Hodinkee shop has always been like the worst on the pricing. You expect to pay a premium through a dealer for used versus going and buying off of Reddit or buying from What You Seek or buying off of a Facebook group. But holy cow, I don't. To me, it's almost not worth looking at their options because they just seem really marked up. That may just be me, maybe a perception issue, but I'm not the only one with that perception issue. And as a brand, Hodinkee, while they still do all these collaborations and stuff, and they're very, very successful, they also have had a lot of egg on their face from things like that ridiculous travel clock. The one that took a key to wind and was super overpriced, and they wouldn't show the pictures of the movement and all of that. Like, that's the side of Hodinkee that it felt like was opposite of the Jack Forster side. And now with Jack going away. It feels like the stalwarts that might have been against the commercial selly, sell, shill side are depleted. And all we've got left is a group of people that will tell you every single watch that comes out is great and it's a great value proposition and they all look good and they all feel great. And when everything is, if we can borrow from The Incredibles, when everything is awesome, nothing is awesome, is sort of my stance. I've seen it in other hobby. You see it with the great inflation on video games. Obviously, from, as I talk about practically every live stream, I'm very involved in pinball as a hobby. When people go around and they give everything a really high rating, you can't tell anything. And arguments that you need to dive in and read the details to truly know, maybe, but we don't all have time for all of that. And in watches with Hodinkee, reading the details wasn't very helpful. All you had were a bunch of glamour shots of great photos of watches, and then just like waxing poetic about how a watch should be $8,000 because of its in-house movement, and a watch should be $8,000 even though it has an ETA because it's got a cool dial. And it's like, I don't understand. And Jack was seen as different. So anyways, yeah, this is pretty big news. I'm interested to see what WatchBox is going to be able to put out in terms of content with Jack doing. Obviously, he's doing more than writing. It did specifically note video. And here's another line that I did not quote earlier, but Govberg said, Jack's arrival strengthens our commitment to education and editorial excellence, and we will be expanding content in all forms, particularly video, to better serve both the WatchBox community and watch collectors worldwide. I've always seen WatchBox as very video oriented, so that makes sense. I actually like the idea of the expansion on that format. The written form works in some instances, like it's great, and in other times it's more enjoyable to consume something via video. It just depends on how the content is. I've seen Jack do both, and I've liked both. Some people find Jack very dry, so he's not going to be an appeal to everyone, but broadly speaking, he is the most popular writer at Hodinkee. I don't even think we need a poll to determine that. I think it's very, very safe to say. So that was the last major item I wanted to discuss. I didn't know if anyone in the chat, what few have been able to catch this live while I do it before noon my time. I don't usually do it this early, but because I had the day off, normally I have meetings at this time, but it's like, no, I'm going to get this out before I get lunch. And I have someone who writes in always saying they expect me to like be eating an egg salad sandwich while I do this, and I will not eat on stream. It irks me to no end. Totally inappropriate. So I won't do that. It's bad enough I have to drink, but I do run out of spit eventually. So that's all I had to cover with those three items, and I haven't seen any queries or questions. So that's pretty much it. If you enjoyed the video or the stream, do give it a like. It helps the channel out somehow, something with algorithms. I don't know. They say it helps, so I have to say it. And otherwise, I should have the Omega 300M review fairly soon. I don't know if I'll have another video in the meantime. We'll just have to see how things go. But and if you have any ideas for topics, like if there's a desire for another market analysis video or something, I haven't done one of those in a little while. Last one I did was on Omega, which wasn't particularly popular, but I get it. It's so tedious to only talk about Rolex. So we might do a Rolex one here soon. We'll see. But anyway, that's it. I say thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and I'll talk to y'all next time. See ya.